And a very good evening to you, and you're very welcome to the GreenZone updates from Jerusalem, conversations with Eugene Doyle.
Thank you.
Every week we bring Irish audiences conversations and perspectives that are rarely heard in Ireland. Our purpose isn't simply to discuss Israel or the Middle East. It's to ask bigger questions, questions about history, questions about civilization, questions about faith, questions about truth, and ultimately questions about the future. Tonight's program, titled Europe in Freefall, Godless and Rudderless, asks one of the biggest questions facing Europe today. Has Europe lost the Judeo-Christian foundations that shaped its civilization for centuries? For centuries, Jews and Christian values influenced Europe's laws, education, ideas of justice, human dignity, freedom, compassion, and responsibility. Today, many believe those foundations are steadily disappearing. Churches continue to empty. Biblical literacy has declined dramatically. Historical memory appears to be fading. At precisely the same time, something many thought had been permanently defeated after the Holocaust has returned. Across much of Europe, and indeed throughout the Western world, we are witnessing an unprecedented resurgence of antisemitism. Many Jewish people now openly ask a question that would have once have been unimaginable. Has the shame of Auschwitz stopped protecting the Jewish people? If Europe, for understanding Israel through its history, culture, and people, as an international interpreter and licensed tour guide fluent in English, Hebrew, and Italian, Marco brings a unique perspective from inside Israeli society, helping Irish audiences understand events through the eyes of those living them every single day. Marco is also the co-producer of the GreenZone, and I want to wish you a big welcome to all three of you to the GreenZone this evening. You're very welcome, folks.
Thank you.
Now, I just want our listeners to do three things before we get on with it. I would like our viewers to share this podcast now, if you would. That helps us to bring more content, decent content, and relevant content to the viewers. I would also ask you to subscribe to this podcast. And then you will get updates every week on what's happening. And then I would also just finally ask you to drop your comment or question in the chat. So anytime during the program, if you have a question, comment, please drop it in the chat. We will bring it to our guests here. And if it's something that's worth that they have to answer, they will be happy to answer that. But just drop in your question, and we'd really appreciate if you could do that. Now, before we talk about Christianity and the Jewish people and anti-Semitism, and just look at what's happening. And this is only in the last 7 days, might you add. Now, we're being told some of them are because of an electrical fault in the system. But just take a look at these couple of pictures here. This is Medjugorje. And down on the left-hand side of the screen there, you can see a guy there pouring petrol on the altar there. And then we can see him there on the right-hand side of the altar. And then he goes and sets it on fire, burning it. And then nearby then, this is what we see on the statue of Our Lady, devil in a skirt, and also devil on this one, and indeed there's a close-up of one of the statues of Our Lady. And then of course you remember Notre Dame a couple of years ago, that went on fire as well, and also St Andrew's historical church in the UK also caught fire, blazing fire actually, in the UK in the last 7 days as well. Now they're saying these are electrical faults. I don't know, I can't say for sure, but they seem very, very dodgy to me. Now, then if you look at the anti-Christian hate crimes in Europe, and this is by ODAC in Europe, report 2025, and it shows anti-Christian hate crimes at 2,211 and 94 arson attacks on churches and Christian sites. That's almost double of 2023. And this is not Europe is not the only place that this is happening. This is happening throughout the world, and especially in Africa, in African countries as well. There is Christian churches and cultures being targeted all the time. So it's not new, and it's obviously a continuing attack on Christianity. And of course, we know what attack there is on Judaism and the Jewish and Israeli people as well. So that's just to give you just an insight of what's happened in the last 7 days for happening. But I'm very, as I say, I'm going to go to Reverend Willem first. Reverend Willem, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, about the work you do with President for Christians in Israel? And, a little bit about where you're from and all of that.
The name is the message. It's Christians for Israel, not Christians against Israel, as it has often been in the history of the church and of the nations. I was born in 1944 during the Nazi occupation of Holland, of the Netherlands, by the Germans. My father and mother have been involved in hiding Jews at the risk of their own lives and the risk of the very young children they had. My elder sister was born in 1940, my brother in 1942, and I'm from 1944. He has been arrested, was in prison, could have cost him his life, and then I would never have been born. But he was an ordained minister in the National Church of the Netherlands, which is the Dutch Reformed Church. I'm ordained in that church too. But I wonder sometimes how many Christians would be willing today to risk their life to save the life of a Jewish person. They did it. And he spoke out very clearly. It was in 1941, in one of the big churches of the Netherlands. He spoke about Zechariah 8, the final verse, pointing to the very special place the Jewish people have in the heart of God, and that 10 people from the Gentiles would one day grab the garment of a Jewish person and will say to him, "Let us go with you because we see that God is with you." And so the audience was afraid what would happen when because the anti-Jewish measures in Holland were full on. But he did it. And I think that's such a bright example for me, but for all the others, because we relive almost what happened in the 30s, before the Second World War. You see the increasement of antisemitism. You see also wavering churches who even change age-old point of views. I'm the president of Christians for Israel International, which means it's based in Holland. We have our headquarters in Holland. In the heart of Holland, and from there the message spreads around the world. Today we are represented in over 40 countries around the world, trying to convert the church. we are not trying to convert the Jewish people, we try to convert the churches on the point of Israel. Because basically, but we will go on further in the program about that, basically, talking about Judeo-Christian roots, as you did, I think there were two roots that formed and shaped Europe. One is the Judeo-Christian root, but the other one is the Greek-Roman root. And I think we are entering a day that the Judeo-Christian root is going down and the old Greek-Roman root is coming up with all the consequences. And so we try to bring this message from the Bible to the churches. We're totally interdenominational. We're not supported by any church, but individual Christians who read their Bible support us to do this work by spreading this message around the globe.
Okay, and thank you for that, Willem. And I also said we have Dr. Susanna Kokkonen here. Susanna, would you tell us, just what you bring to this conversation? Tell them a little bit about yourself as well, about what you do, and because you're very much aligned with what we're talking about here tonight as well, aren't you?
Yes, thank you. So my background is very much in Israel. I lived there over 20 years and I did my doctorate at the Hebrew University. And I think the Hebrew language has been very important to me in opening also the world of the Bible. And to see what's happening today, I used to go around the world and teach a lot about the Holocaust. And I still do that, but I noticed that the anti-Semitism is growing so fast. And so anti-Semitism is growing at the same time as persecution of Christians and this push against Christianity in Europe, actually in the Western world. It's happening at the same time, and that's very shocking. So my time has been very much devoted in the past years to teach about anti-Semitism, to do different educational programs and so on. And I'm also involved in politics because I feel that it's really important for us to defend the Judeo-Christian civilization. By the way, in the English language, very often when you used to talk about the Western world, you would use the words Western and Judeo-Christian, those two civilizations, you would use them interchangeably because Western civilization was Judeo-Christian. But now what I notice and what is really making me worried is that a lot of people don't even understand. When I say Judeo-Christian values, they actually don't understand. What do you mean by that? What do we have in common with what you call the Judeo part of it? So I think it's I'm kind of having the same mind as the Reverend that if we are losing that and we are just referring sort of to the antiquity, we have for example, in our justice system, we have also influence from the Roman, the Roman Empire and all of that. But if we are losing the Judeo-Christian values, we are using the ethical and moral foundation, because that comes from the Judeo-Christian values.
Okay, and that's and thanks for that, Susanna. And that's where I'm going to start this evening's program with. Really, is what do we mean by Judeo-Christian civilization? What do we mean? Tell our viewers what we mean by that. Anyone can take up that. Whoever wants to take up that. What do we mean by it?
I think the root of Europe was shaped by Judeo-Christian thinking. Of course, looking back in history, there was the Roman Empire, which had their own gods and which was basically in the grips of Greek philosophy of all kinds of sorts. One of the most popular religions in the Roman Empire, a religion of themselves, was the Mitra religion. It was the worship of the sun god, who was, and they had even elements of killing the bull and mysteries, and bread and wine played an important role in their ceremonies. And besides that, the Romans had adopted all the Greek gods, gave them different names, but also adopted Greek philosophy. When you were an educated, when you wanted to educate your children and you were rich enough, you tried to buy a Greek slave to teach your children in Greek philosophy, in Plato, in Socrates, in all the philosophies, in the art and in the architecture, and also in democracy. Democracy is an invention of the Greeks. And also they adopted more or less the vision that a higher form of love than between a man and a woman was the love between two men or two ladies. A man and a woman were only necessary to keep the human race going, but a higher kind of love was between same-sex people. And so this whole sports, Olympic Games, which were played in the nude, this whole, but also science and technology, the Greeks laid the foundation of what today is science and technology in the Western culture. So although the Romans militarily conquered the Greek Empire, in a sense, the Greeks conquered Rome spiritually, in their way of thinking, etc. Now, when the decline of the Roman Empire set in, there came an Emperor Constantine in 300 plus. His mother was Helena, she was a Christian. His father was one of the worshippers of Mithras, the sun god, and he was more or less a mixture of both. And so when he shaped the new Christianity, he first did a wonderful thing. He had the Edict of Milano, abolishing the persecution of the Christians, so the freedom for Christianity. But he went further. He asked all the leaders of the church together in Nicaea, and then he dominated and rephrased the creeds of the church in a very anti-Jewish way. He abolished Shabbat. He said you should have nothing to do with that wretched religion. He changed it in the worship of the sun day, literally the Sunday, Mithras being born on the 25th of December. He said that's the date when our sun has born. So it became a mixture of old gods in the Roman Empire and also this Greek philosophy, basically. And it then started a long history by which the church declared one anti-Israel statement after another. And so the Judeo-Christian values that we talk about, yes, there was a kind of Christian garment, but underneath that garment, there was Greek philosophy and there were old gods present who deep down hated Israel, hated the Jews, and hated the Christians as well. So it was on the surface Christian, but another spirit moved along in it as well. And now that what you said, the churches are more and more empty, and we have entered what is called the neo or the post-Christian era, which is the era after Christianity. You see how the other old root is coming up, the Greek root, and is taking over. And with it, the hatred of Christians and Jews. During the 2000 years of church history, that hatred flamed up every time. I can give many examples of that, but we have no time for that. But what we have now entered into in Western civilization and in Europe is that more and more you see the attitude, yes, we have known Christianity, yes, it brought us some blessing, yes, it gave us our society and some values, we've known all that, but we don't want it anymore. We will now enter into a new phase, in a new philosophy. We will strive for the kingdom in the name of man, not in the kingdom in the name of God. So the old-fashioned religion should simply disappear, should be re-educated into the new ways of thinking. And if they don't, we drive them to the edge of society. And if necessary, we drive them over the edge of society. And so that's what basically, I think, in a nutshell, is going on. I want to stress one more point. We, over the centuries in Europe, and especially in the Second World War, have a long history of anti-Semitism, with the climax, the murdering of 6 million Jews in World War II, among them 1.5 million children, for no other reason than that they were Jewish. By killing the Jewish element in our society, I sometimes say we cut the root and stole the fruit. We cut the root, the Jewish root, and we stole the fruit. But when we started killing that, God will not forget that we murdered 6 million of his people. And there's a beautiful statue in Rotterdam. It's called by the people Jan, which is a very popular Dutch name, without a heart. It refers to the bombardment of the city of Rotterdam in the Second World War. The whole center was bombed, so the heart of Rotterdam was killed. Now, for me, this is a symbol of what civilization in Europe has become. We lost our heart. We killed the Jews. We started to hate them over the centuries. And if you do that, you lose your heart. God spread the Jewish people around the world. For 2,000 years, they lived among us, not as a curse, but as a blessing. Now, when so the synagogue was there, the word of God was there. When people came to Christ and to faith in Christ, and they said, what kind of God is it that we are now starting to worship? Then they could say, it's the God of the Jews. It's their Bible. But when you cut that, you cut your heart. And so the post-Christian era is almost becoming more and more an apocalyptic era. We lost our heart with all the consequences and the fruit of that.
Susanna, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think, I don't know who is watching this podcast, so there might be people who need this explanation of that. I will continue the way that I sometimes put it very simply when people don't know that.
Please do.
You know, when we talk about Judeo-Christian values, that the Jewish people in the Old Testament are the laws that God gave to mankind. So we have the 10 Commandments, but we also have a lot of other laws that govern many different aspects of how a man is supposed to act, or how a government even is supposed to function. So our judicial system very much took from that. So, for example, you are not to give false testimony, or you are not to take bribes, or all these kind of things that are very important. So when we say Judeo-Christian, one way of putting it in a very simple manner would be that the Jews received these laws, and then Christians took them all over the world. And that's how we shaped all those nations in the world that we call Western nations. So what the problem is, that when you take Jesus from the Jewish context, and you say that he was not a Jew, you separate the Old and the New Testament, and then you no longer understand what are Judeo-Christian values, because you don't have that, what Jesus had. He had the Bible, that was the Old Testament, and when he refers to the law or prophets, he is referring to the Old Testament. And I think that's a problem, that increasingly people are very much divorcing Jesus from his Judaism, from the Jewish background. And therefore, to say that we have Jewish Christian or Judeo-Christian values is very difficult for people to understand, because they don't even hear that Jesus was a Jew, that everything that he said, that came from Judaism, and that's how we need to read it and understand it. So it's the ethical, and it's the moral, and it's even culture, religion and culture. Like we as Christians, actually, if we followed what Jesus was teaching, we would be very much Jewish in our outlook, because everything came from Judaism.
Yes, that's absolutely true. But it has been in the church from the beginning. When the church started to grow, less and less Jews had accepted Christ, very few actually. Then the church, very early in church history, said, well, we are the new Israel. We are the chosen people of God. Yes, once upon a time, the Jews were the chosen people, and we thank them for the Bible and for the 10 Commandments and everything. But when they said no to Jesus, God said no to the Jews. He became very angry. The city of Jerusalem was destroyed. The temple was destroyed. They were spread around the world. They lived there in exile for 2,000 years. And you can pity these poor people because they had to suffer so much. But it is a warning to us all. This happens to people who say no to the Lord and no to his anointed one. And then they said, but we, the church, we said yes to Jesus. So now we are the new chosen people of God. We are the new Israel. The role of Israel is finished. The land is not important anymore. The land, that small piece of land, you must see this in a spiritual way. The promised land is not that small piece of real estate in the Middle East. The promised land is heaven. And when you hear about Jerusalem, then it's not that city over there, it's the heavenly Jerusalem. And we, the church, are going through the desert with all the trials and tribulations of this world until we come in the promised land, and that's heaven. So the whole role of the Jews was from the beginning eliminated. The land was not important anymore. The city was not important anymore. The Old Testament was a Jewish book and was not important anymore. It was about the faith in Christ. It was going to heaven. because the Bible speaks about the kingdom of heaven, which is the kingdom on earth given from the heavens, but on earth. But the church says, no, the kingdom of heaven is heaven. It's how you get to heaven. And so that put the Jews immediately at the side. They were a thing of the past. They were not important. And the Lord only kept them alive to show his wrath and his judgment upon them and these people who had murdered Jesus. And so this, from the beginning, is the case. And you see the fruit today, for instance, in the Anglican Church, who had two declarations very recently. One, a beautiful declaration on anti-Semitism, that you should not endorse anti-Semitism. But on the other hand, a few weeks later, they issued a statement that the Jews had no right to the land of Israel. The whole matter of being as a promised people in God's land in the Middle East and the city of Jerusalem. So the Anglican Church says there was simply a mistake made in 1947, 1948, when the decision was taken to grant the Jewish people the land of Israel. That's totally wrong. It's politics, no more than that. And so the basic attitude of the church has always been anti-Jewish from the beginning. And yes, the Ten Commandments, wonderful, but and that's now coming clear that during the ages, when the Crusaders entered Jerusalem in the Middle Ages, they drove all the men, women, and children in the great synagogue and burned them alive, walking around the synagogue. To God be the glory. Next day they celebrated Holy Communion because they had taught the Jews another lesson. The Inquisition, yes, some Protestants were burned at the stake, but in the southern countries of Europe, thousands of Jews were burned at the stake with the crucifix of Jesus right before their eyes. We do this to you now because of this. And Martin Luther has said the most vicious things about you. Burn their synagogues, burn their books, chase them off your lands. Never give them a decent job, give them a good beating. The only thing he did not say was kill them, but for the rest he said everything. So the Nazis could quote Luther and could say, well, Martin Luther already hated the Jews. We will finish what he started. And so this is now coming
full circle.
This is what's happening, and there's no resistance in the theology of the church. The only hope for the church is that they repent and start reading the Bible all over again from the beginning.
Can I ask you, Willem? You've told us the way that the church has created this, the way they see the Jewish people. That they're now the chosen people and all that. How do you see how God sees what happened back then? How do you see the Jewish people in the context of Christianity?
I think sometimes my heart bleeds because I know that God is a patient God, but he loves the Jewish people. He created the Jewish people to bless the whole world. When he called Abram from the Babylon culture in 2000 before Christ, he said, I will show you a land, go to the land, I will make you into a great people, I will bless you, and through you I will bless the whole world. The whole reason of their existence is to bless the world. And they always have been a blessing. And so when they were in slavery in Egypt, then Moses and Aaron, the leaders of that time, were sent by God to the Pharaoh of Egypt and said, let my people go. And if you don't, because the Pharaoh, you had the 10 plagues of Egypt, and in the end, they did not want the Jewish people to leave. It was a slave people for them. And then God said, let my firstborn son go. This is how he calls Israel, my firstborn son. And if you don't, it will cost you your firstborn. And that was the 10th plague in Egypt, that the firstborn of the Egyptians died because they did not let go God's firstborn son. And so the relationship of God with Israel is of a father to his son. He created, it's his son. Was the son always obedient? No, he was not. We have beautiful children and grandchildren, but there were times, and they're wonderful people, but sometimes they could behave that you get so angry. So there has been times that God was very angry with this disobedient son of his. But you never reject your son. He's your son. She's your daughter. You don't. So one day God will hold the nations accountable for what they did to his firstborn son. And I'm a pastor, an ordained minister in the Dutch Reformed Church. I go and preach in all kinds of churches every Sunday, and not just in Holland, all over the world. And I say, you repent, or the time is coming that God will hold you responsible for what you did to the Jewish people. He will also hold the church responsible for what they have done over the centuries with his Jewish people. That he doesn't do yet is only because he is full of patience and he wants to give people the maximum time to change their ways and to repent. But one day the great reckoning will take place. So when we, and you see it in Holland, over the years, when the Jews were kicked out of Europe, the Dutch said, welcome to Holland, you're welcome here. They could build their synagogues, they did their business in the 1600s, 1700s. They did very well in Holland. And Holland did very well alongside with them, because God promised, whoever blesses Israel, I will bless. I will see what you're doing and I will bless you for it. But if you curse Israel, I will curse you. Now, this small land of Holland, once upon a time, was almost a world power. We were blessing the Jews. Our economy went sky high. So now the climate is changing in Holland, and God watches us closely. And he will say, what are you doing? Because if you start cursing my people, I will curse you. And more you see how the decline in Holland takes place, how the morals change, how lawlessness sets in, the beautiful 10 Commandments are despised. We had in Holland Christian politics, and over the centuries, national laws that were inspired by the laws of the Bible. But in the last 30, 40 years, all these laws are changed into humanistic laws, and they don't want to have any say anymore. God says, or the Bible says, we have nothing to do with this God, we have nothing to do with the Bible. So this brings us more and more and closer to the judgment of God.
And Susanna, just in relation to, we talk about the 10 Commandments, there's also the book of Judges, that Israel at the time brought a lot of, I suppose, made life a kind of a civilization, if you like, with judges to judge on people's on when people did wrong or whatever like that. Western democracy owes a lot of its origins to biblical thinking back then in the Old Testament, doesn't it?
Well, actually, even during the Renaissance period, many people don't know that there was a great interest at that time in the Hebrew language and actually in the way a state would function if they were following the laws that were given in the Old Testament. So that's a very interesting concept. But when you think about that, for example, we have division of power, meaning that one branch of government cannot make decisions over itself. There are several branches, and then they control so that we have a fair system of justice. But that's in the Bible, the division of power. And there are a lot of things that come, for example, that if somebody has murdered or killed, there's a difference in the punishment because the intent was maybe not to kill, but you still killed, and so on. So
cities of refuge, due
yeah,
process.
so you have all, yeah. So all of our laws, if you think about it, you can already find them in the Bible, and then that you are to establish courts, and they are to hear the case of each person, and that the person who is greater in the society, nevertheless, you are not going to, if they are guilty, you are going to judge them because God hates injustice. He doesn't want to see the innocent person going to prison or being punished, and so on and so forth. So all of this comes from the Bible. And I think I agree with with the Reverend that, from the beginning, this has been a problem at the church. But I would like to say that actually maybe to discuss this with you, that, there's like always a small remnant of people who are faithful to the word. And I heard Rabbi Israel Meir-Lau, who was the chief rabbi of Israel and a Holocaust survivor, and he was talking about Egypt. And this is a very interesting point because he said that in that story where the Jews were trying to leave and where the Pharaoh was persecuting them, there's one Gentile who is a righteous among the nations, and that's the daughter of Pharaoh. She rescued baby Moses, and she was probably, according to the rabbi, the only person who could do that, the only person that would not be punished for doing that. So what I'm saying is that I also see this. I'm very sad, actually, for what's happening at the church now. But I'm just saying that I think us, like, who are alive today, that we have to be like the people in the previous times who saw what was happening around them. But there was always somebody who was still being righteous, who was still doing the right thing. And that's the only hope that we have in this story. Because, if I lose my hope, if we lose hope, because everything seems like so mad around us right now, but then there's nobody left who is going to be doing the things that need to be done. And I think that's something that was really important for me to say.
Absolutely. And Susanna, just in relation to Europeans, many younger Europeans have little understanding of Judaism. Can Europe understand itself without understanding its Jewish roots?
For the younger people in Europe, well, I mean, all of this culture that we have around us, all the laws and everything, much of the European art, music, literature, it's all referring to the Bible. And that, to a very large extent, that is from the Old Testament. That is the law, and that is the prophets, and that's the stories that happened to the Jewish people. And Jesus, was born into that. He was born a Jew. His parents observed things that God commanded the Jewish people to observe. And he actually spent a lot of his time at the temple in Jerusalem, which was the central place of worship for the Jewish people. And even as a young person living today, if you want to understand your roots, if you want to understand culture, literature, art, music, you need to actually to know the Bible, because the Bible is the source of much of what we call our European culture.
And Marco, living in Israel, do Israelis still recognize Europe as part of the Judeo-Christian world, or has Europe become something completely different?
Well, what we perceive from here certainly is a continent that is in a severe crisis. Of course, I'm generalizing, of course. And I think we can relate it to what is happening in Europe. Europe indeed is engaging in a sense of self-harm by its attitudes. Its whole series of reference points have been destroyed. So in effect, what you see is a very weak metabolism, a very weak immune system, which of course is the consequence of its Judeo-Christian identity being dissolved. So once such a system is in a weakened position, you see all the elements that are ready to pounce on it and to attack it. And I think what we've certainly seen in recent days, especially with these huge waves of migrations from countries which are certainly at odds with European values, bear witness to this. So Europe is in a great crisis. I don't think that the situation is hopeless. I believe there are rumblings beneath the surface. There is a reaction. People are beginning to realize that what they took for granted, namely their own Christian civilization, can no longer be taken for granted if they want to survive as something we understand as Europe. And I say Europe as opposed to the EU, because I see the EU as something that is fundamentally contrary to European civilization. So much so when it was suggested that references to the Judeo-Christian tradition be incorporated into some kind of constitution, European EU constitution, it was rejected. So
Yes, the Pope could not change that. He could not have it ended. You're quite right.
Indeed, and an Italian Catholic person who was a proponent of this, who was apparently a candidate for the European Commission, I believe it was Rocco Buttiglione, if I remember correctly, his candidacy was rejected. He's an important Italian philosopher from a Catholic area, but also somebody very aware of the importance of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Yes, yes. It's a serious matter.
Okay. Just in relation to the moral and spiritual vacuum in Europe at the moment, you know, the secularization, decline of Christianity, collapse of shared values, identity politics, consumer culture, historical amnesia as well. And I might even add in there climate obsession. Can a civilization survive after abandoning beliefs that created it?
I don't think so. I don't think so. What struck me one day is a verse in the book of Hebrews, which is in the New Testament of the Bible, where the author says it is impossible for people or a nation or a culture who once have tasted the goodness and received the fruits of the gospel and of what the Jewish people offered in their relationship to God, to the world. When you have tasted it and then turned your back on it, it is impossible to then turn back again. You had your chance, you had for centuries the beauty of it, the blessing of it, but you said no. Now it's impossible to change it again. Praise God, there will always be these pockets of light, small groups who keep these things, and God, in their eyes, they're very important. I was thinking about Sodom and Gomorrah. They were hit by the wrath of God in the Bible. Fire came upon them. But Abram negotiated with Almighty and said, if there are still 50 righteous people, will you then uphold your judgment? Well, said the Lord, if there are 50, okay, I will not do it. But 40 or 20 or 10, which is the number of the minyan, of course, 10 righteous. If there are 10, God says, I will not come to judgment. But there were not even 10. And so these minorities are very important for a nation, for a people. When there is this minority, and I couldn't give numbers to it, but they save their nation more or less, or keep somehow still the anger of God outside. And so, and I think you have in Israel also the same discussions, if I may say so. Israel is one of the only countries in the world who has not een grondwet, a basic civil law.
Constitution, you mean?
Or constitution, sorry. Israel has no constitution because the Torah is their basic constitution, and that should guide their life in Israel. Now you see in Israel more and more also the debate, we want to be like the other nations, we should have a constitution. What was this constitution? It started with Napoleon, that was the human rights and so forth, the trias politica, you talked about it and so forth. We want to have such a system of a constitution. So so I hope that in Israel, they will look at Europe and say, well, if you lose your fundament, your basis being the word of God, then you will end up with the same kind of ideas and the decline of your civilization as you see it happen in Europe today. So I'm rather pessimistic about the future for Western, because we had it and we deliberately said no more. And the word says it's impossible to, well locally and well in small numbers and well for individuals, but as countries or cultures as a whole return to Christianity or Christian values or Judeo-Christian values, that's not going to happen anymore.
Susanna?
Well, I'm reminded of the book of Judges in the Bible when Joshua and all that generation passed away. And it's very interesting because in November 2015, there was a big terror attack in Paris. And I was actually in the United States. And I was reading that just the night before. And then the next day, we heard about the attack. And it says like this, that God no longer, because God was no longer with them. And it says, and they could no longer stand against their enemies. And I think I'm reminded of that because so much of what's happening in the past decades, a lot of our systems that were functioning very well before are no longer functioning so well at this point. And then we have had all these attacks of terror, and we don't know what's going to happen. It's very uncertain. And that's it's not just because of money and because of the things that we try to fix with politics, but it's because of the lack of values. People no longer see, even young people commit suicide increasingly because they no longer see why they are even living. Why is life even worth living? So this hopelessness and drug abuse and all these problems, they come actually from the lack of values rather than just from the lack of money or other such things that we can fix much easier. So if you look at history and you look at nations that were great, and then they started a decline. So we mentioned Holland before, because Holland had a decline from the status that it once had in the world. But before Holland, it was Spain. Spain was a great power. And actually these people, many of the Jews, they came to Holland from Spain. And then Holland became this great nation. But Spain never gained that position again. I'm really not seeing any example in history of a nation that they were able to rise again to a status that they had once, and then there was this decline, which we are now witnessing, in my view, in most of the European or the EU countries. And that's kind of pessimistic, but that's the way that it seems.
And just before we go any further, Marco, just to let you know, I don't know whether you've been reading in some of the wires, on some of the wires, that the Jewish people or the Israelis are responsible for the tens of thousands of migrants that broke into Spain earlier last week. You guys are to blame for that as well.
We've been at it again.
Now, go on. Sorry, Reverend Willem.
Yeah,
I just want to ask you this. Susanna talked earlier about that she was very scared about the speed in which this is all happening, the declining in Christianity. And I can tell you one thing, that the change in Ireland has been faster than any other country in Europe in relation to how it has changed in such a very short time, from being a Christian Catholic country to post-Christian and anti-Semitic. I'm not saying everyone in Ireland is anti-Semitic. I'm not saying that, but certainly the chattering classes. But can I ask you this? Do you believe that God is angry enough that he has allowed the devil to take over?
That he allowed
the devil to take over.
No, no, that's not going to happen. This is his creation. This is his universe. This is his planet Earth. This is his church. These are his people around the world. And especially this is his people, Israel. Israel actually is the greatest sign of hope that the world has ever seen. We see a miracle happen. We see God in action. We see already for many years how the Jews are returning to the land from all the corners in the world. It's incredible. When you turn to Jeremiah 30:23, that's even a greater miracle than the Exodus out of Egypt, way back 1400, 1200 BC. So we see God in action. We see that God is now moving forward towards his plans with planet Earth, towards his future. And his future is the kingdom of God. And as I said earlier, what is the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God? It's not heaven. That's not our final destination. It is the kingdom of peace and righteousness on earth that is given by the heavens, that's coming from heaven to planet Earth. When Jesus was born, the angels were singing, peace on earth. And so Jeremiah, read it tonight in 23. because it's such a wonderful thing. It's so clear. He says, and let me do a little quotation. The days are coming, declares the Lord, where people will no longer say, as surely as the Lord lives, who brought the Israelites out of Egypt, way back. But they will say, as surely as the Lord lives, who brought the descendants of Israel up out of the land of the north. And when you hear north, south, east, west, you have to put your feet in Israel and then look on the map of the world to the north and the south and the east and the west. So they will come from the north and out of all the countries where he had banished them. Why is it that it's happening now? What is next on his agenda? Jeremiah explains it very clearly, thousands of years ago already. The days are coming, declares the Lord, that I will raise up to David a righteous branch. Messiah is coming. In his days, Judah will be saved. Israel will live in safety. And this is the name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteousness. He will be king and reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land, and for that matter, on the whole earth. So God is now moving forward to bring this wonderful kingdom of peace and righteousness on earth, and use the Jewish people again, as he always has done, to bless the world. So from Jerusalem, that's why Jerusalem is such a hot potato, because I think the powers of darkness know their Bibles better than many priests and pastors and Christians. They know that God is on the move now. They know that he will change the things dramatically. And so they will try to block everything that God is now doing, but he cannot be stopped. When he is on the move, nobody can stop him. When his time has come, I remember in the past that we in Holland demonstrated in front of the Russian embassy in the 70s and in the 80s. Let my people go, says God. But in our hearts, we didn't believe it because communism was all powerful. Nobody could get out of that land. The Iron Curtain was absolutely closed. And from one day to another, suddenly the whole Iron Curtain collapsed. Prophetically, for no other reason than that the time has come that the Jews should come out of the land of the north to return back to the land. He needs them in the land. So we see this process. And that makes the guilt of the church much bigger because they have their Bibles. They can read it too. They can see what's happening. And so Israel is the greatest sign of hope. He will do what he has in his mind because he's the owner of everything. And so, yes, we're experience terrible times. We will face darkness maybe as never before on planet Earth. And we see how the churches are going down the drain. Ireland, Holland, you mentioned Spain already in the past, the United Kingdom, what is left from there, etc. Yes, we go through a dark period, but it will come. Jesus says, when you see this happen, you must see them as birth pains. We have 4 children, and when the birthing process takes place, it starts slowly. These contractions of the muscle are not too strong, they're not too painful, but the further you come in the process, the stronger the contraction of the muscles take place. And in the end, when the baby must be born, your wife can shout, I cannot take anymore. This is too much. Will this come all right? But it is a process of birthing a baby. And when the baby is ultimately born and you hold it in your arms, then the pain is soon forgotten. So Jesus says what will come upon planet Earth will be increasingly more painful, but it's a birthing process. You must never forget this will lead to the coming of the kingdom on earth, to peace and righteousness. This will ultimately lead to the renewal of all things. And so when you understand that, it's like us in Holland. I told you about my parents who in the Second World War were hiding Jews, could cost them their lives. And it did cost many people their lives when you stood with the Jewish people like that. Had the resistance movement in Holland known this war will be over after 5 years, we will be free again, that would have been a reason to even be stronger in your resistance against these demonic things that happened to Holland. They didn't know. Hitler said this is an empire that will last for 1,000 years. Had they known, it would encourage them tremendously. In this case, we know the final phase of this darkness that is coming to planet Earth will be short-lived. And then the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords will enter from Jerusalem to bring peace and righteousness all over the world.
And Marco, going on what the Reverend is saying there in relation to the amount of people coming from all over the four corners of the world coming back to Israel and this dark period that we're in, I assume looking from an Israeli point of view, what was once probably a confident Europe has now become confused, has it not?
I think that's the operative concept in Europe. It is a babel. I think you've said it in a nutshell. Here the situation is very different. With all our difficulties, the situation is very different. Yes, indeed, people are returning to the land of Israel, but more importantly, the natality rate is on a different level to what it is in Europe. That means that people see a future. They have a project. They understand themselves as being the custodians of something which they're duty bound to transmit to other generations. So I think what the other speakers have said is certainly very true. And I would also like to sound a note of optimism in the sense that Israel can be a source of inspiration for Europe, as indeed the biblical narrative was in the past. And the Reverend Wilhelm Glashouwer will certainly know that the Dutch revolt was to a great extent inspired by the biblical narrative, if I'm not mistaken, Reverend Wilhelm. And indeed, in other countries, the Risorgimento in Italy, to a great extent, took from the biblical narrative, the opera itself, Nabucco, the return of the Jews in the period of Nebuchadnezzar. So we have all these resonances. The elements are in place. So I think we should be optimistic, notwithstanding the terrible times we're living through.
Absolutely.
No.
And Israel will be no longer the tail of the nations, but the head of the nations. The book of Deuteronomy, the Torah says. And we're heading for that time. So you have to play as Jewish people with your everything that God gave you. You will be a blessing for the rest of the world, for all the nations, more and more. And so we won't look at darkness. We know that the end will be beautiful.
Now, I want to move to anti-Semitism, because when moral confidence weakens, prejudice often finds fertile ground, and we're seeing that more and more. Susanna, why has anti-Semitism returned in such a vast way?
I mean, that's a question that is really hard to explain, because anti-Semitism is not something that it's just an act, something that a person does or says, but it's a historic, not an ideology, like a force that has some kind of supernatural element to it. It can be very irrational. And it has always existed, but it has always been able to adapt itself to the surrounding society and the circumstances around. So for people at this time, living at our time, they like to separate anti-Semitism from what they feel about the state of Israel. In other words, right now, I believe that the state of Israel is now the greatest target of anti-Semitism, but a lot of people, even in the academy, they say that it's okay, you can hate the state of Israel without being anti-Semitic. And I think that's what really needs to change. People need to understand that the state of Israel is a Jewish state and that you cannot hate that state without it being anti-Semitic, because like in the periods in the past where it was always a force that fitted with that time, right now the force that fits with our times is this hatred against the state of Israel. And then it's spilling over to the communities that are more defenseless in Europe or in other countries, even to murder Jews, like we have seen in the past 3-4 years. So I think I cannot really tell you why it surprised me. I have to say that I had been speaking about it for years, but when October 7th happened and this anti-Semitism became so strong, it even took me by surprise, because it was the first time that I saw it in front of my eyes as a global thing that united people from so many different backgrounds. And the thing that united them was their hatred of the state of Israel and then of the Jewish people. And I like to say this one more thing, that often people say, well, how is it possible that people who have nothing in common, Islamists and extreme liberals, how is it possible that they all hate the state of Israel and they come together around this issue? And I think the only explanation I have for this, and I actually believe that it's a biblical explanation, is that hatred is darkness, and darkness loves darkness, even if it's a different kind of darkness. But that's why these people are able to come together, forget their differences, and just hate the state of Israel, which is light, because God created Israel to be a light to the nations.
I was on... sorry, go ahead, Reverend. Yeah, go ahead.
I have just turned to Psalm 83. That is a beautiful psalm. And a man from Israel cries out to God and says, God, do not keep silent. Be not quiet, O God. Be not still. Your enemies are astir. Your foes rear their heads. With cunning they conspire against your people. They plot against those you cherish. Come, they say, let us destroy them as a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. That is, and the root of anti-Semitism is hatred of the God of Israel.
Yeah.
You cannot get to God, but you can get to his representatives on earth. So let them destroy them as a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. With one mind, they plot together. They form an alliance against you. And then all kind of various people, nations, groups are mentioned, but they are united in an alliance for this purpose.
Yeah.
Let them destroy them, let them wipe them out, kill them all, solve the problem, drive them in the Mediterranean. And so anti-Semitism, I think Susanna is quite right, anti-Semitism is this deep hatred in the human mind, soul, against the God of Israel. But it is today also and foremost expressed into anti-Zionism. And so they say anti-Semitism, yes, we are against anti-Semitism, but we are anti-Zionist. This is about Israel and the politics.
Exactly.
Anti-Zionism is basically anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
It is a disguise, but it's the same root that drives these emotions. And well, in Holland, I think there is the component of the replacement theology, which moves people to be anti-Jewish, but it's also more and more through Islam that this is promoted in Holland. When our center in Holland was bombed by demonstrations with their Palestinian flags, they threw the bombs because of what we tried to do, to stand with Israel, to explain the beauty of the Judeo-Christian ethics, etc., get rid of them, and that's so. When you remember Jan without a heart, the vacuum that is created by the rejection and the killing of the Jewish people, now other spirits move in to fill up this vacuum. And so faith, Bible, God out, and new ideas, man, new. We don't have time for that, but it's strange. The only world religion that came after Judaism and Christianity is Islam, as a kind of reaction, I think, to Judaism and Christianity. Hinduism is older, Shintoism is older, Confucianism, nature's religion of the natures, but this is a kind of, and this new thing will grow and grow and grow. But again, God is in control and we're heading for his future. He will not let go. Never he will what his hand started to do, and the world will again know the blessings coming from the Jewish people in Israel, from Jerusalem.
Now, earlier, I was on Instagram, just happened to go onto Instagram. I don't be on my phone all the time, but I was on Instagram and I came across, the thing from Boy George. And you know the way you flick up on Instagram and the next story comes. I saw at least 10, if not 11, anti-Israel and anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist messages, just one after the other coming up. Is today's anti-Semitism a lot different and a lot more powerful than previous generations?
I think it's more and more openly powerful. And the only thing is, like the resistance movement, what we should be is going underground and be the spiritual resistance movement of the end times by informing, using the modern media like you do in a program like this, because that's the beauty. We have the mass media and we can go all around the world in all kinds of languages and so forth to resist this kind of thinking and these kind of things that are happening. Because if this goes on, like in the 30s, it could lead to another, but then worldwide persecution of the Jews and of the Christians. But that's why Israel is such a sign of hope.
And Marco, just in relation to, because if we're looking at the speed in which this is happening in Europe, if we saw a graph, we would certainly see a spike since October the 7th in Europe. How has Israel watched Europe change since October the 7th? There's a big change, isn't there?
Yes. Europe has changed, but things had always been simmering beneath the surface. I was just looking at some podcasts as well with Chime, with what we really understood. And if you join the dots, you can see that there were forces throughout the course of the years, of the decades indeed, that were poisoning European and American society, preparing the ground for what happened on October the 7th. So much so that on October the 8th, they already had their foot soldiers on the ground demonstrating, and they were all part of a coordinated attack. We had the kinetic and terror and rape and sexual violence attacks on October the 7th. Then we had the various renter crowds throughout the world, in university campuses, occupying the main streets of European cities, of course, with their agents, I call them agents, in the media. So this was something that a lot of us saw coming. And unfortunately, European society is feeling the repercussions now, because the flag of Palestinism, which is the flag of jihad in reality, all these forces are coalescing around this flag and attacking, let's say, Christian society now. It is now Christian societies which have to and will have to bear the brunt of the attack, and indeed defend themselves from their attacks, and take all the necessary measures. And it's going to be painful. Europe will have to take some very painful measures. It'll have to reevaluate the whole notion of citizenship. A citizen shouldn't be a person who merely resides in a country and by dint of that very fact receives citizenship. He should be somebody who has weaved himself into the fabric of what is essentially a Christian society. And alas, we see many people who do not wish to do so, who wish to place stress and tension on the fibers of this society, of these host societies. So Europeans will have to rediscover their identity and their compass, their moral compass. At the moment, as in the title of the podcast, we see Europe is rudderless, with, for the most part, spineless political leaders.
Now, this part is for both Reverend Willem and Susanna, so you can both come in on this. But is it not pure and utter madness, and really showing the vulnerability of human beings when you have Christianity siding on the side of Islam in lots of cases against the Jewish people, and when we know what Islam wants to do to anyone who is not a believer? I mean, does that show a madness in human beings, or how should we see that?
Yes, I think what you see basically happening, it happens all the time. When it happened on the communism, the church sided to protect her people in Russia against the communist attacks. The Russian Orthodox Church did not resist that line of thinking, but made an allegiance with them. It happened in Germany. The German churches sided, made the concordat with Hitler and its regime. Both the Protestant and the Roman Catholics did, and when they were shaking hands with Hitler, that gave him the freedom to do whatever he liked to do. The slogan of the Hamas is, on Saturday we take the Jews, and on Sunday we take the Christians. And so now that Islam is moving forward in Europe, instead of churches who stand up and return to their own roots in a peaceful but in a determined way, no, you see the same thing happen. The churches again now siding with Islam, in a kind of hope that they will be not suffering too much. So this has always happened, but again, always there has been a strong minority who resists and who speaks out and who is courageous, and God will see that too and will bless that attitude as well.
Susanna?
Well, I think this is kind of taking us also into the political world, that when you think about it, that media is having so much power in our societies now, and the media largely comes from the left side of the political map. There are a lot of research about that in journalism you have mostly people who come from the left side of the politics. And then that's pressure that is brought on governments, on politicians. And the media, for some reason, is largely sympathetic to the cause of the Palestinians or Islam. And it's another reason is that Europe does not feel that Europe has the right to be nationalistic, that we are becoming part of this global society, but we don't have anything to defend in our own countries. So Christianity is not to be defended, but if somebody offends Islam, then everybody's going to rush to defend Islam. So I think it's a very complex situation where you have a lot of interests in the academia and in the media, and they bring a lot of pressure on politicians. And then we have in Europe, we have some very courageous people in politics who are speaking up. And for example, in our country, in Finland, this government, which I'm happy that my party is in the government, but we now have much tougher laws on how you can come and stay in this country, what conditions you must meet to get the citizenship and things like that. And I think there might be some kind of change, that people are seeing more and more of these things, and they actually no longer want to agree with this very liberal view.
Okay, and I just want to move to Auschwitz because it seems to no longer protect the Jews. What happens when living survivors are no longer with us, and the whole teaching of what happened after Auschwitz? What happens? Because that to me now looks very dark.
I think when they are gone, that's another factor that will be bad, because more and more voices come up today that it actually never happened, or that it was much less and not millions. Yes, there were some victims, but maybe a couple of hundred, couple of thousand. But so the truth is then further and further strangled, and that's the whole mentality more and more, that what is good is named bad, and what is bad is named good. It's the the changing of the whole a whole paradigm change is taking place with all kind of words that the truth is darkened and lost grip on even the normal human mind. It is all like in 1984, the great the great book by George Orwell, the media brainwash with the new mentality, with the new ideas, with the new philosophy, with the new kind of religion, brainwashes the minds and the hearts of the people, and that's serious business.
Susanna?
I think the other aspect is that usually, Paul Celan, one of the most famous Holocaust poets, and he spoke about witnessing, bearing witness. How do you bear witness to this, what happened? But now we are coming to an era where we have not seen what happened, and there will be no longer anybody who saw. And therefore, we have to become witnesses to something we did not see. And that means that there's a lot of difficulty in that. How can I be convincing? How do I tell others that this happened when I have not seen it? So it's a very wide question. People like Elie Wiesel, he had such moral authority because of what he had seen. He was a witness, but he became this man who had this huge global, moral authority. And I don't think after him there has been anybody else like him with that status. And I think it's going to be a big issue, even in education. How do we talk about history? It's not ancient history. It's actually not ancient, but how are we going to make it relevant in a world where you also just want to watch a video that is very short? You don't want to read, you don't want to study, and it's going to be a very big challenge in Holocaust education.
And finally, we're going to wrap it up now, but we're going to say, I know, Reverend Willem, I know you painted a very dark picture for the future, but with a lot of optimism at the end of that dark period. In other words, it has to get darker before the light comes. But can Europe recover at this stage?
Can you?
Europe recover. Dus recover. Kan Europa daar bovenop komen?
I don't think so. Which, of course, I would love to say, yes, let's be optimistic and let's all... No, what the scriptures teach me is what Jesus teaches me, is that darkness will settle on the planet more and more. But it is, the darker it gets, the closer you come to the moment that the sun rises. The sun, and I think that the sun is rising, that God's future is coming because of the restoration of Israel. That's the great hope for the whole world, that he has started the process now. So yes, one day this is all over, and then it will be peace and righteousness, not just for Israel, but also for the nations. And there will come a time that these dark powers have no power anymore whatsoever, because the King of Kings, the Messiah of Israel, is coming, and he will make all things forever new.
Susanna?
Well, I wanted just to say, if there's somebody watching this, that God's word says that he will give a future and a hope. So our only hope in this world can come from God.
Marco?
Oh, I'm optimistic, notwithstanding all the darkness. I think we all express it in a different way, but at the end of the day, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, look, we've got to leave it there. I want to, if my guests can hang on after the end there just for a few minutes at the end, I just want to say tonight's discussion has taken us far beyond politics. We've spoken about history, faith, memory, identity, and the future of Europe itself. And whether you agreed with everything that was said or not, these are conversations that deserve thoughtful reflection. At the Green Zone, we believe Irish audiences benefit from hearing voices and perspectives that are often absent from our national conversation. Only by hearing different viewpoints can we truly engage with complex issues such as these. My sincere thanks to Reverend Willem Glashouwer, Dr. Susanna Kokkonen, and Marco Alexander for sharing their experience and insights into this really enjoyable conversation tonight. If you've enjoyed tonight's discussion, please subscribe, like, and share the program so others can discover these conversations. I'm Eugene Doyle, and thank you for joining us on the Green Zone Updates from Jerusalem. And I thought we'd leave you with something positive in a world where good is evil and where evil can be celebrated. There's always one who will stand out from the crowd. In this case, it's Boy George, who this week has parted ways with his label manager and was pulled out by his manager of a West End musical, Jesus Christ Superstar, because he released this song, We Will Dance Again, about the October 7th massacre at the Nova Musical Festival. And here it is, and a very, very good night to you all, and take care, and we'll see you next Sunday.
You say genocide, I say war. When you're attacked, it's what the army's for. Does it get ugly? You bet it does. When I know you wanna kill every last one of us, every last one of us, every last one of us. You never mentioned October 7th. Young girls raped against trees, murdered brutally for the crime of dancing. You condemn the Jews with selective memory. Musicians holding flags, mouthing like sheep. Propaganda fueled by the internet. It feels so weak, but trust me, we will dance again. We will dance again. We will dance again. And there will be no war. But if you're ever confused, I stand with the Jews. I don't feel brave, I just need to behave like a human. But trust me, we will dance again. We will dance again. We will dance again. And there will be no war. But if you're ever confused, I stand with the Jews. I don't feel brave, I just need to behave like a human. But trust me, we will dance again. We will dance again. We will dance again. And there will be no war. But if you're ever confused, I stand with the Jews. I don't feel brave, I just need to behave like a human. אתם אומרים רצחים, אני אומר מלחמה, שבאים להרוג אותך.